Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Well, we're back to regular. We're back to like our regular formation, like me opening up, and then because last week you were in the driver's seat asking questions, and this week we're back. I feel more comfortable, I guess.
Yeah, feel more at home. That's for sure.
Well, I kind of have like an idea of like what's going to happen, and whenever I don't know the questions or anything like that are coming my way, then I tend to freak out just a little bit.
Especially when the interviewer refuses to write down anything to tell you what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, you're like, it's all in the head.
Anytime I like interview someone on this or have done the extra point or whatever, if I've got to interview someone else, I'm shooting from the hip. It's just like, so I'm not giving very much information to you all on the front end.
No, you're better at shooting from the hip than I am. Like I needed some topic. I need some points. Because if I shoot from the hip, I mean, we're going to talk about whatever randomness my mind comes up with.
That might be fun. We should try that with everyone. Just one good time.
We're gonna call that the inside the mystery meat jar. It's called Jared's head, because that's what it's gonna be like. But hey, like after our last conversation that we had about preaching, you and I, as soon as we got done with that, we're like, we got to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
We got to keep on going. We got to talk about this. And so if you haven't listened to the last episode that Pastor Scott and I were in, we talked about preaching, just kind of like a little bit of like the ins and outs and what it looks like. But this time we want to go a little bit deeper and talk about preaching on what it looks like on more of like a preparation side. And so, because, I mean, obviously on Sunday morning, like we would be able to tell, like you're really good at shooting from the hip, maybe asking questions, but without preparation and planning and careful consideration of a whole number of things on Sunday morning, you may be able to do that for maybe 10 sermons. But after that, it would just be like, all right, let me rinse and repeat again and kind of go over the stuff that you're a professional in. You know what I'm saying? Like the topics that you know tons and tons and tons about. So whenever you begin to start preparing for a sermon or maybe sermon series, like the initial thoughts of these things, like how far in advance do you start putting some of these thoughts down and trying to consider all the information, maybe with life instances? Like how far in advance do you want to have just like the basic idea of what you're going to start preaching? Yeah,
so one of the things, and this is something I've been talked to about since I was in seminary, and I don't do it very good. I know there are people that do this way better than me, but the place where all of this starts as far as sermon prep goes is understanding that all of life as a preacher, all of life is sermon prep. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people miss this. And this is a lot of times why you'll find people that can't connect with audiences, or they just don't have good, fresh content all the time, or they've got to do the Saturday night special where they just go and download someone's sermon off the internet. Yeah. Even if you paid for it, it's it's still, it is what it is.
And that's a legit thing for those of y'all that are probably like that are new to that type of concept. It is a thing. Like you can get online and subscribe or whatever.
I would not suggest it. I would say if you're not coming up with brand new content the vast majority of the time that you're speaking, then you may have misheard what you think that your calling is. But we'll leave that
between you and God.
Yeah, we'll leave that for another time. That's not for me to say. But you have to see all of life as sermon prep. Mm-hmm. So I've told y'all either on the podcast or in some sermons recently, like I'm just a movie nut. And so one of the ways that I like to decompress and is by going to the movies, sitting in a dark theater by myself. Now, that is one way that I just personally decompress. I get away from life and everything. But I also like entertainment because it's like I find stuff in there that is what people that are listening to me teach are watching. It's telling me the predominant views of culture and things like that.
Yeah.
And so as I'm not just sitting there watching TV or watching a movie, I'm also exegeting the culture that I live in. I'm finding out things, and I'm finding ways to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
So tonight when I get home and I go to the ball field with Landon, because we're going to probably go watch some of his buddies play, and it's just, we like to go down to the ball field and hang out, and he can run around, and, all of that down there, interactions I'm having with people. Things that I'm seeing, things that I'm hearing, it's all sermon prep. It's all learning the culture, learning things. And then that's one of the great things about the Notes app on an iPhone. I just have quotes, stories, things. And this is the part that they teach you in seminary that I don't do very good at. Because there's people like, you would find a lot of really awesome preachers that have like an Evernote that is like meticulous. Like everything they ever read has to be like organized in here, quotes by this. That way, if they're preaching a sermon on like suffering, they have a suffering folder, and just boom, boom, boom. I'm organized in a lot of ways. I am not organized like that, but I do like write down things that strike me in entertainment or in conversations, or if something happens with my kids, whatever it is. You have to first and foremost, if you want to be a good communicator, see all of life as sermon preparation or communication preparation. You just have to look at life that way. Because if not, then there's this like, well, when I'm sitting in my office, then I'm sermon prep, and then, you got to have a lot of experiences there in your office, for you to really. But if you will look at the whole of life as this, then you're constantly mining content and you're hearing from culture and things like that, which really helps you be able to preach effectively. So that's really where preparation starts. I know you asked how long in advance am I thinking about sermon series or content, but that's where it all starts. I don't watch TV with my wife tonight without it being some sort of sermon prep where I'm thinking, oh, that's a theme, that's something like that. And so from time to time, I may just pull my phone out. Like I was playing a video game. I think it was last year. I was playing the remake of Final Fantasy VII, and they said something in it, and I typed it into my notes because I was like, that speaks so powerfully to something. I was watching, Batman, and I heard something. I think it was Batman Begins was on TV or something. I was like, wow, something they said in there like spoke so strongly to different things. So again, I'm just taking those notes as I'm going through it. So that's where all of this starts. Now, as far as where we get our sermon series and individual sermon ideas and things, it starts probably 18 months out. Yeah. Again, with the notes on my phone, I have a list of sermon series that as I'm thinking or have some clarity, time to just sit in a room or whatever, I'm taking stuff down. And then we do creative offsite meetings normally as a staff. And the one that we have that's normally in August or September, we will pretty much set the teaching calendar for the next year. Yeah. But all of those ideas that I bring to that have already been with me for a couple of months. They may not be anything more than a title, or they may not be anything more than a theme, and then we have to kind of work it together to make it what it's going to be through our prayer time and processing together as a team. So we do that probably in September. And so this coming September, we will have all of 2023 on paper. That doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. Like, we were talking in our service planning meeting this week. I said, make sure you look at the teaching calendar. It has drastically changed. Yeah. I took out a whole sermon series and extended one and moved stuff around based on how the Spirit's moving and the Lord's leading at this moment. But you get to do stuff like that when you are that far prepared in advance. Yeah. Preparation is making room for God to be able to do whatever He wants, and some people overly spiritualize things, and they go, well, I don't know what the Lord is going to want, next February, so I got to wait till a week before to come up with what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. Like, well, if the Lord exists outside of space and time, He already knows what he wants in February. He can actually tell you that right now.
Yeah.
What you're doing is making an excuse for most likely being lazy.
Yeah.
And not doing the hard work of preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, it starts that early out. And they, like I said, they may not be anything more than a series title, but we at least know where we're headed in that. Because then, if I know, like right now, if I knew I was doing an apologetic series, so we're currently doing this Not So Blind Faith.
Yep.
Since I knew that last fall, between last fall and now, I've been able to read a bunch of apologetics books in my spare time on my drive to and from work. And so I'm already, like, for months and months and months and months, having this content build up in my head.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was coming. If I wanted to do an apologetic series, and I decided, and this is how some pastors operate. If this is you, congratulations. But I'm hoping if you're a pastor listening to this, I'll push you into a different direction. Let's say that this week you go, I'm going to start an apologetic series this Sunday. And here we are, we're recording this on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, that means you've got from now, Tuesday, until Sunday to get all your research done, write a sermon, get it ready for the people. My sermon for this weekend, I have been in one way or another thinking about or preparing for since last September. Now, which one do we think is going to be more effective?
Yeah.
Right? We know this is the difference in what a lot of communicators call crockpot thoughts and microwave thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not many things you make in a microwave that are ever going to rival the flavors that come out in something that's been sitting in a crockpot for hours.
Yeah, that's so good.
That is the difference between, if I were to start, I could do an apologetic series this Sunday. I could. But the level of depth that I'm going to be able to get if I just start now compared to starting back last fall is going to be drastically different.
Yeah.
And the reason why, it's so hard for people to preach every 7 days and come up with fresh content is because you're always chasing your tail, because you're not far enough out to where you're capturing all of this. And so that's one of the things that I watched our old pastor in front of me do this sort of planning, and he instilled that in me, and it was one of the greatest gifts that he gave me, because I was able to watch how he operated, and he didn't have to chase his tail.
Yeah.
It wasn't like every week coming down to the deadline, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're going to do. The other side of this, and you know this because you do the graphic design and all the video work, if I said, hey, our new sermon series starts this Sunday, it's going to be called, Clowns and Balloons, man. You're going to be like, well, now I have 4 days to come up with this. Now I got to try to match I got to learn the birthday song, and I got to do this, and I got, all this stuff. Well, you can't do that in 4 days. But since you've known we were doing Not So Blind Faith since last fall, you could say, well, what are some songs that we might incorporate? What's a good countdown song? Now I can make this video. Now we can get this nice image made. Now we can do some social media posts all about this. What are some other things that we can do to add to what we're offering in the sermon series?
Yeah.
And all of that is available to you when you plan out. We have a series coming up this summer.
Well, we also advertised for it at our biggest event.
Exactly.
Back in
April. At the Easter egg hunt, we were able to pass stuff out that said, hey, we're going to deal with this topic that's probably going to be interesting to you.
Yeah.
We were able to give that to probably 500 people that we wouldn't have been able to if I'm just doing it now.
Yeah.
And this is a topic that people really care about. We have seen an increase in our numbers over the last couple of weeks. So it's just that's what it gives you the ability to do. It helps you advertise. It helps you be creative. There's all sorts of benefits to being planned out. Like, we have a series coming up this summer called Sandcastles.
Mm-hmm.
One of the weeks of that series, we're doing Flip Flop Sunday.
Yep.
Where we're going to ask the church to wear a pair of flip flops to church that day.
Yep.
And we're going to donate all these flip flops that you all bring in to an organization that's going to put them on the feet of people that don't have them.
Yeah, called Soul Mission.
Yeah, and we're going to walk away from church barefoot that day.
Yeah.
Our little bit of discomfort doing that is going to remind us of how big of an impact we just made with those. You can't do stuff like that if you wait till the week of.
Yep.
These are all the opportunities that you forfeit when you're chasing your tail of trying to figure out, and this is the problem. These are the types of things that churches that are having major impacts and seeing significant growth, this is the stuff that they're doing. And what happens is most of the time, pastors put this on the back burner and do something else with the majority of their time, and then wonder like why the church isn't growing. Because this is always the thing. Well, if I had the staff like what you had, then we could do this.
Yeah.
You may have a valid point, but if you also prioritize this stuff, you might be able to grow your church to the point where you could hire this staff that you need to do this even on a larger level.
Yep.
But because that's the decision you have to make, and we've made some very intentional decisions at Southridge to make sure that the vast majority of my time is spent on getting ready to communicate in all the different ways that I can communicate.
Yeah.
If like tomorrow I'm going to a local high school to speak. I've got one more time I'm going to the middle school to speak. 6 or 7 months this year, I'll be at the senior center every Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
Teaching. It's only 5, 6, 7 people at the senior center, but that's still an important discipline. I get almost all of Tuesday, like this today, I have been reading and watching lectures from some of the like greatest minds for our sermon this Sunday since 9 o'clock this morning, completely uninterrupted. I will do the same thing for the vast majority of tomorrow, because we've decided that the communication is one of the things that drives the growth of the church, and so therefore we prioritize it. So you're not going to find me out doing a lot of stuff that other people might do. And honestly, if you make that staff argument, well, you just have a staff that's covering all this, I would prioritize my time almost exactly the same as I do now if I was the only person on staff here, because I know that great communication is why people invite other people to come. You have to have great worship. You have to have great kids stuff. But if the guy or girl that gets on the stage to deliver the message can't do it, this is why we don't just let anyone on our stage.
Yeah.
Right? For our worship team, there's tryouts.
Yep.
Why? Because, I'm sorry, we're not just going to let someone get up there and bark out a song. We're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
People don't want to invite their friends to that, and we're not just going to let anyone get up and preach.
Well, it's just excellence in any area, in any facet of life. It drives people to want to be engaged or be a part of it. That's why Disneyland is so exciting, is because every little detail is so meticulously thought over, and every interaction that you have whenever you go to Disneyland or Disney World, wherever Disney, and it's just so memorable. The smells, the conversations, the rides, the experiences, and everything. Yeah, the church has a lot to learn from that type of mindset and that type of thinking.
You'll find that book, Be Our Guest, from the people at Disney. I know it's on your shelf, on a lot of church leaders and business leaders' shelf, because we understand, especially in the church, excellence honors God and it motivates people. Yeah. That's the two things that we're trying to do at church. We're trying to honor God. We're trying to motivate people. Here at Southridge, we're trying to motivate you to take your next steps. We do that through excellence. Excellence inspires people. It motivates people, and it honors God. We were just talking about this in our staff meeting yesterday morning. Excellence is not always having the best. Here we are. We're a mid-sized church in South Charleston, West Virginia. We don't have all the bells and whistles of churches of thousands, but we can still do excellence because it's doing the best with what we have.
Yeah.
And so when it comes down to this sermon
and God
prep
honors
process,
that type of that mentality, and He blesses it.
Yeah,
completely. He really does. He really does.
Without a shadow of a doubt. The Lord puts together the body. He sends people where He knows that they're going to be fed and where they can be used. And so you got to be the type of church that can be true of. And I believe God will trust you with more and more. It's just like the parable. When you're faithful with small things, He will trust you with more. Yeah. So if people come to your church and they can't use their gifts, and you're not, exciting them and helping them take next, and I don't mean like it's all hype, I'm saying exciting them, motivating them to take their next steps. Yeah. Well, then He's going to have to find somewhere that's going to do that. Yeah. He's going to have to send those people somewhere where they can be used and motivated to take their next steps, so that way they can become a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And this whole preparation thing, we can pull it into any area of ministry, period. But that's why it starts so far out for us. And then, honestly, it'll probably happen again by the end of this year that our teaching calendar will change, because the criticism of this type of planning is like, well, where's the Spirit at? Where's the Spirit at? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I've already studied six plus hours today
Yeah.
on something. And if you put in what I've done before this, I'm probably 20 plus hours, maybe 30 plus hours into this sermon. And if the Lord told me tomorrow, hey, I want you to preach something different Sunday, then we'll do it.
Yeah.
I didn't lose all that research. It's still good. It's still good for when he says to use it. So all of this preparation and having all of this time, I would argue, is not less spirit honoring and less spirit filled. It's actually more, because it's giving the Spirit the opportunity to move. It's going, okay, I believe this is what you've asked me to do, and at any moment you can step in and change it.
Yeah.
But if not, I'm gonna believe that I've heard you correctly the first time. And sometimes I'm wrong. That's why. Actually, this is already the second time this year that we have changed our teaching calendar, because I just forgot we extended for the future at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So anyone that would look at the way that I do sermon preparation or anything like that and go, oh, that's not Spirit-filled to have what you're doing for a whole year. It's like, well, it's there. I believe the Spirit led it, because he already the Lord already knows what we need in October. He's already there.
But also in the preparation, if there's a revelation of something that you've not learned or just didn't think of in that light, you don't think that was the Holy Spirit leading you to that specific topic or that point? I mean, if we always look for like these big ginormous signs in the sky or the handwriting on the wall, and it could just be just the simple revelation of something that you're studying that is Spirit-led. I mean, because whenever your heart is drawn closer to Jesus or a better understanding of who Jesus is through your study, that's all Holy Spirit right there.
100%. That's why, in the other part of this prep, and again, this is an area that I want, that I continually see improving, but still a long ways to go, is anyone that is communicating regularly, the only time, if the only time you ever crack your Bible open is when you're prepping a sermon, you are headed for disaster.
I was actually wanted to unpack that a little bit, because you said you do so much preparation and reading and studying and all that for you, and you're doing tons and tons of information, just taking it all in preparation for sermons. So I wanted to just, for you, unpack it a little bit. What is it? How do you begin to turn your mind off, because you're just digesting all this information, but you're like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm focusing on my personal spiritual growth as well.
Here's what I've learned is, if I do it first thing in the morning, I feel fresh to do my own personal study, and then the rest of it is my job. Yeah. So, like for me, when I leave here I told this to somebody I was talking to a couple weeks ago, because they were asking me, they were like, man, how the level of study and how did you all this? And I said, well, here's the thing. I will work my butt off. Yeah. But when I leave this office today at 4 o'clock or 4:30 or whenever I finally get out of here.
Depending on how long podcast goes.
I'm actually, this actually might be the one exception to this rule, because I actually do plan on bringing my stuff home with me tonight, because I'm so into what I'm learning right now. Yeah. I normally would never do this though. So normally when I leave this place, I'm done. Yeah. I'm not picking, I may listen to a sermon, or if I'm listening to a book on my phone, I'm normally listening on the way to the office. On the way home, I'm listening to the Nate Land podcast or music or something totally mindless. Yeah. And then I'm doing very little anything once I leave here. So I've learned I come in and I do my personal time when I first hit the office. Mm-hmm. So right now I've been reading through 1st and 2nd Samuel. And here's the other thing: if you're not doing this, if you're only if you're only cracking your Bible to prepare for the next sermon, then all the stuff that you're only ever reading what you're already preaching, so you'll never be able to get ahead. So here's the secret sauce. Next year we're going to do a series on 1st and 2nd Samuel, because I just went through it personally, and I've got 20 weeks I could do on 1st and 2nd Samuel. Yeah. It's all there. In fact, I'm going to introduce a little bit of the content at the high school that I'm going to tomorrow, because, the Lord just keeps – so that's also another generator of content, is to keep yourself – it's not sermon prep, though, because this is the Lord speaking to me. This is when he's going, all right, before you're qualified to get up and tell anybody anything, look at this in your life. And so that's my Bible reading. It's I do prayer journaling. I don't do real well. My mind just wanders if I'm just trying to pray. So I do prayer journaling with my headphones on, with worship music blasting, and that's how I spend probably 10 to 30 minutes most Monday through Thursdays.
Yeah.
I'll just be honest. As a husband and a dad and a pastor and a coach and all the other stuff, what Friday and Saturday looks like in regards to that, it is very messy.
Yeah.
But I know if I can get Monday through Thursday in, that it's feeding my soul, and then on the weekends I'm doing what I can to try to get that, and then I've got worship on Sunday, and there's all these other things. So I'm not saying that I'm not like, but that's the discipline. It's got to be as much Monday through Thursday as I can.
Yeah,
I'm going to do some stuff on Friday and Saturday in regards to. Of course, I'm going to pray.
Yeah.
I'm going to read something. I'm going to do something that feeds my soul on those days. If that's worship music, Friday morning when I'm taking the kids to school. So that's the other part of it. If you only ever crack your Bible for your sermon prep,
yeah,
not only will you not have fresh content because you'll just be spinning up everything that you're getting, you also will become spiritually unhealthy, and ultimately you will disqualify yourself in one way or another from the ministry of preaching in the first place.
Yeah. It's so good. It's just discipline, like you said, you got to be disciplined to put in the hours.
Yep. to
study and prepare for your sermons, and not trying to do it the week of, but also in your personal life and in your personal study.
And let me add this: if you're not passionate about it,
mm-hmm.
it's you misheard the Lord. Like if sermon prep is like the bane of your existence, you're like every time it's like, I
dread it.
I gotta go study. It's like you are in the wrong field, like completely.
Yeah.
Because like I'm so energized at this late in the day after. I mean, I have literally read and listened to lectures from people that have like PhDs for hours, and I feel more energized now than I was at 9 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
If that's not how you feel about sermon preparation, it's just not the thing for you.
Yep.
It would be the same thing. Like if every time that you had to pick up your guitar,
it would be a dread, and
my
fingers are gonna hurt.
Like maybe I'm not in the right role. Or if you're a kids pastor and you hate kids, like that's just. I mean, that's how I knew I wasn't called to kids ministry. I did a year as a volunteer here at Southridge in kids ministry, and that's how when I told people I was called to ministry, they're like, "Well," I said, "I'll tell you one thing. I don't know exactly where, but I'll tell you it's not kids."
Yeah.
Because it didn't fill me up.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I didn't like the kids. I didn't like kids ministry.
Yeah.
And all that. And so if sermon preparation, I said this the other couple weeks ago on my Facebook. I wish I could find that quote. There's a great quote that said something to the effect of if preparation isn't, if you're, what is it? I don't know. I don't have Facebook on my phone either, so I can't go back and look at it. But I had a quote on there about how preaching turns into nothing more than performance if preparation's not your desire. Like if you don't desire to prepare, all you desire is the microphone up on stage in front of everyone on Sundays, then that right there is a major issue. I think that might have been Spurgeon, but I've badly misquoted him, right? Is this it? Yeah, a desire it was H.B. Charles, sorry. A desire to preach without a burden to study is a desire to perform.
Ooh.
Yeah. If you want to preach, you want to get up and talk in front of people every week, but you don't have a desire to actually study, then you only have a desire to perform, and that the pulpit is not the place for that. And I say pulpit, which is funny because the 90% of the weeks that I preach, I will not preach from a pulpit. And that comes into more communication stuff that we could talk about, maybe even on a part 3 of this, because this is my passion area. I love this, and I hope that people listen. Whether maybe you're not even a pastor, but you're just interested in this, or maybe this could just help you in some area of your communication where you communicate at work, or you're a teacher or something like this. I think there's a lot of overlap, but yeah, I love preaching and communication, and I am convinced that it is probably one of the 2 biggest drivers of church health and church growth, period. Because, I mean, you can have the best welcome team in the world and some of the best musicians in the world, and if the person that gets up to share the word can't handle it properly, I mean, nobody's going to show up to listen to that.
Yeah.
And I can already hear like the religious crowd going, "It's the Spirit. It is the Spirit. It is the Spirit working through people that are willing to do the hard work, that are called to it."
Mm-hmm. It's so good. I kind of want to touch on the topic now that we're kind of like in this vein. We're probably going to have to do a part 3, and I'm okay with that. But the importance of good theology.
Yeah.
It's not in my notes, but I just kind of felt that little nudge in my spirit. The importance of good theology and the importance of this is kind of in that same vein of being prepared. I have this little quote, and I don't know who said it, but I read it somewhere. It says, "The better you prepare, the better you present." And so obviously the more time that you spend in preparation, but also making sure that you're presenting good theology.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness gracious. I think everybody that hears that statement would agree with that.
Yeah.
But so many times it's not necessarily the case because Scripture's taken out of context, or we kind of pick and choose parts of the Bibles and try to fit a certain narrative, and it's a very slippery slope to be on. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of good theology?
Yeah, and I want to do this very sensitively because this is a passion point for me, and also a little bit of a pain point, because what I'm about to say I think is a good general rule of practice, but not a uniform thing that I think should apply to everyone. And the thing is, when it comes to good theology, the reason why there's so much bad theology is there are so many people placed in positions of power that were not properly trained to be in those positions. And that is a failure in some ways of the church to not produce more people going into Bible college and seminary to take leadership roles in the church. That is a major, major problem. And so what happens is you have all of these churches that there's no pastors coming out of the seminaries to fill. And so they go, "Well, you're here. You like to talk. We'll put you up there." I have someone in one of my circles that I teach in and hang with. She said before Southridge, she had never been to a church where the pastor had been formally trained in any way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you have to go to seminary or anything like that. I'm just saying if you didn't go to seminary, then you better be a major nerd of books and seminars and lectures and anything you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
Don't just take the position and then like realize, well, now I've got the position. Now it doesn't really matter. No, you have to continue to grow if that's your story. If you got there without going through some sort of formal training, seek out some informal training. Yeah. Find a theological mentor. Submit to the authority of some sort of denomination or movement or credentialing board that can oversee what you're teaching and can oversee how you're being developed. There's the problem is though, we're not churning out enough pastors. The church is not churning out enough pastors to fill all these pulpits, and so you get untrained people that are nice people, good people, and some of them they feel called by God, and I can't stand I can't stand in judgment of that. If someone says they're called by God, okay, you're called by God. That's not up for me.
Yeah.
But you do get into that situation a lot where there's not enough trained pastors to fill all these pulpits. There's not enough downward, like people pouring in theology and doctrine into the church either to properly disciple these people. And that's why I'm such a stickler about theology, which is funny for me to say that, because there would be plenty of people that would listen to me preach and say, like, how theologically incorrect he is.
Yeah.
Right? And that's because like my style of doing this is I major on the major things and minor things. I can get along with a lot of people on minor things.
Yeah.
But we live in a culture that where biblical illiteracy, even within the church, is just rampant. The stuff that people think that they know, they most likely got
passed down to them.
Down from them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was passed down from them from people that were not qualified to teach that.
Yep.
And so you get these people in your church even that like have not been exposed to proper theology and doctrine, or any time that what they were raised with gets challenged a little bit, they're up in arms. They're like, there must be something wrong with this. Like, we live in a culture where, like, anytime we feel the least bit challenged or stretched, we automatically assume that must be wrong.
Yeah. Rather
than lean into it and try to learn something. And so that's where I'm at with it. Like, when I feel challenged or stretched, this is why I'm doing this book club with people. Not one of the books that we've read yet have I 100% agreed with everything that person said.
Yeah.
But if I had to 100% agree with something, with everything some person said, I would never read anything.
Yeah.
And so I allow myself to be challenged and go, you know what? I just don't agree with that. But I'm glad I was exposed to it.
Yeah.
And in these areas of secondary importance, I don't separate from these people. Yeah. I don't like... There are heretics, right? I mean, there are heretics out there, and I do not mind to call that out. Like, when you start messing with the divinity of Christ and the perfect, spotless sacrifice, and salvation is only through faith, period. Faith in Jesus. You start messing with that, I am going to call you a heretic.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to call you a heretic if you have a different view on women in ministry than me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not going to call you a heretic if we don't agree on eternal security. These are people that I consider my brothers and sisters, whichever way we go, as long as we don't get too nutty one way or another. Right. But I do think the issue with the lack of formally trained pastors, and even myself, I'm not necessarily where I would like to be, but I'm where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like, I have a master's in Christian ministries. I would like to have a master's of divinity. But some, I know for a lot of people, it's for me, it's what's holding me back. Yeah. I don't want to go into debt because, believe it or not, being a pastor is not the way to make a whole bunch of money and go fulfill all your dreams, like, you're just we're not in this for the money, clearly. So,
well, and accruing like another 30,000 or whatever in debt just to, at your age, it's like,
what are you going to do with it?
I'm not trying to say you're old or anything like that.
No, but that's where I'm at.
Most people are.
I can get this same and this is the beauty of the age that we live in. I can go. I like it for this series. I've been listening to William Lane Craig, who is a unbelievable apologist. I think he still lectures at Biola, which I looked into Biola to go and to get a degree there, and then I was like, you know what? This dude is for free out online. So I just go take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do whatever I can to grow myself without having to go and take that next step. But I have three college degrees. For me to say I'm not where I want to be, just in context, like, I have a bachelor's in sports management, which is so helpful with what I'm doing right now. But I do have a bachelor's in Christian ministries, and I have a master's in Christian ministries as well. And so I think if you can't afford it, go do something.
Yeah.
Go do something. Never stop learning. YouTube is such an unbelievable gift. I know that sounds crazy, but there's online courses you can take.
Yeah, you could take one class at a time and start taking steps to get into that direction.
Yeah, it's
because you can afford $150 or $200 for, like you said, like an online class. And just get that behind you, and then whenever you got a little bit of extra money, do the next one.
You can afford a book.
Yeah,
you can buy a book, and it costs $12 to buy a book, and what
cheaper
I see,
if you go to thrift books.
Yeah, But like, this is the problem. This is where all the bad, this is bad theology comes from. All these folks that are just unchecked in the things that they say, and it's just like, well, this is what I heard, and this is what I heard, this is what I heard, this is what I heard, and it's so unbelievably important. If like I said, I'm not saying everyone has to go to seminary. That was part of my path. But even from the time I graduated seminary until now, I feel like I've learned even more than I ever did in seminary, all from the books and the lectures and the things that I have read. And so that's another part of preparation, and I think that we do need to be sticklers when it comes to our theology and doctrine on the things that really matter.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Now, we got a little bit of time left, and we can dive into we can dive into two more topics. But I wanted to ask, okay, so whenever we're get kind of back onto our initial conversation, so whenever we are looking 12 to 18 months out, and you start to look at these different sermon types, you've got the idea, okay, I've got these couple types of different sermons that'll work well. Can you talk a little bit about these sermon types and maybe how often that you would like to use them? And I'm talking along the lines of like you said, like we're doing an apologetic series. Maybe you want to do an illustration. Maybe you want to do just something else. Can you talk a little bit about these sermon types and maybe some typical areas that are ideas or topics that you would like to use them in?
Yeah, I used to really subscribe to a flow of how we would teach throughout the year that I actually inherited from the guy that did this before me that I watched, and I thought this is the way that he did his preaching calendar made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
and so I use a lot of it, and a lot of the stuff that I've always taught and believed about preaching, I see even evolving some. So even some of this has changed a little bit, but what I'm looking for when I'm deciding what series we're going to cover is I want to make sure that I'm covering as much of the scriptures in 1 year as I can. So I want to make sure that there's a representation of the Old Testament and of the New Testament, one way or another. I haven't done this a lot lately, just because I've been fulfilling this in different ways, and because I did a lot of the small books already my first couple of years. I like to preach through books of the Bible, but I don't do it the way that most people do.
Yeah.
Like if we do James, we're going to do the letter to James. If we do this, and we've done this once or twice, I'm going to do it for 5 weeks, and I'm going to take one passage out of each chapter.
Yeah.
And call that preaching through James. Whereas someone that really is preaching through James, they might go 12 weeks, verse by verse, through all of it. I like to do that, but the way that I'll do that now that I've done a lot of the shorter books of the Bible, because I don't want to. I want to keep things fresh. Now I'm finding chunks of scripture that all fit together, like the Sermon on the Mount, and doing the same thing where we're preaching through it, spending a lot longer. And so later this summer, we're doing a series called Inception, where we're going to do Genesis 1 through 11. Yeah. So it's the same idea of preaching through a book of the Bible. If I were to preach through Genesis, all 50 chapters of it, I mean, I would barely get through it by the time I retired, probably.
Yeah.
And so I'm that exegetical style, and we talked about this in part one of this, that exegetical verse by verse. I'm doing that without doing it in the smaller books. Now I'm doing it in larger sections of it that I think it's working. Some of it's topical. We brought back in February, I like to do a relationship series. I don't always do it. Yeah. And I felt like we had just seen so much relational tension with a lot of people in our church and in other churches and just all around, everywhere because of the stress that the pandemic put on everyone, relationally and financially and in every possible way. Marriages and relationships were just really struggling. So we knew that we had to do a relationship series this year, so that's what we did. Leading up to Easter, we're always focused on Jesus. I know that probably sounds obvious, but so this past year that was
I don't know the name of the title.
I know I just literally drew a blank. Oh, Out of Bounds.
Yeah.
So we did Out of Bounds leading up to Easter. So it's always going to be something that we're focused right for 6-8 weeks.
I know why I was drawing a blank is because I didn't do the logo for it. That's why.
Yeah. So I want to do that. Now, one of the new things that I'm doing is we're trying these longer series, especially over the summer. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we did Imperfect Instruments.
Yeah, that was last year.
That was like a 10-week survey through the book of Judges.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to do something along like that. That's what Inception is going to be for us this year.
Yeah.
I do topical stuff. We're doing sandcastles, which naturally I'm putting that in summer because we want to theme it with where we're at.
Yeah.
In the fall, like in August or September, I like to try to do stuff that's going to get people's attention because that's when everyone's getting back into the groove.
Yeah.
So where they're getting back into the rhythm of coming to church, and so you want to make sure that you're doing something that's going to help them, draw them back in. I'm not taking my own advice on that this year again because the teaching calendar has just gotten kind of messed up, but that's okay. The Lord is in charge of that.
Yeah.
Same thing in January. We're always trying to do something that's going to help people take their next steps because that's another big hot spot of the year for when people are going to be ready to introduce new habits and things like that. So you want to hit that stuff in January.
Yeah.
And all of these are good rules for practices, but again, the Lord's in charge. If during our fall kickoff this year, we're going to be in the middle of Inception.
Yeah.
We're going to be right around, Noah's Ark or something at that point, and it's not necessarily what would fit the bill for a September series, but that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Our big one comes up in October this year, which is a little past the kickoff point, but I think our series this October is going to be so compelling that we're going to see a lot of people want to come out for it, and I think a high invitation.
Yeah.
I like to try to do something on thankfulness and things like that during Thanksgiving time. Again, I'm not following my own rule on that this year.
Yeah.
So these are all like rules that I have, but I'm always open to whatever the Lord lays
do
on
as
my
I
heart.
say, not as I do.
Yeah,
no, but
it's the same way that I do with preaching. Like that's what I told Megan. She preached on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so she asked me in preparation, she said, how do you get up there without your notes? How do you memorize this? I said, well, I don't memorize my sermon. This is another thing we could spend a whole, hour on. I said, I don't memorize my sermon. I understand my sermon, and then I go and tell it. There's a drastic difference in memorizing something and understanding it. This is something I learned from Kerry Newhoff. He talks a lot about this, but I understand my sermon, so I know ultimately the argument that I want to make.
Yeah.
And so I can just follow that argument, and I'm just up there talking because the Lord blessed me to talk.
Yeah.
But I told her, I said, let me answer your question. I said, I don't memorize it. I understand it. She says, I have no idea what you're talking about. I said, well, we'll discuss that a different time. I said, second off, I tell people not to preach with notes. I am not telling you that. Right, so what I think is most effective for me, I do not think on the first time that you stand up in front of a crowd to preach that do not do as I do as I say, or don't do as I say, or whatever it is in that situation. I'm like, listen, this is
more comfortable.
Yeah, this is my. I think people should eventually not preach from notes, or if you have notes like me, very little notes. Like I'm preaching off of note cards that have just signature statements that help my flow of thought if I need them. If this is your first sermon, you should not do that whatsoever, unless you are just an unbelievable, otherworldly type communicator. Like it took me, I was probably in my 6th or 7th year of ministry before I did this.
Yeah.
And it was so funny. The church bought me that beautiful metal podium that we'll use from time to time, that Megan used this past week, the week that I made the declaration I wasn't preaching from notes anymore.
Oh, goodness.
So with series like this, I've been able to utilize it some, and guest preachers use it and whatnot. But, yeah, this is one of those things. Like, I have rules for the teaching calendar.
Yeah.
But they're always open to whatever the Lord wants to do. And if he wrecks my plans, his is probably better anyways. So.
Yeah. Now, what about illustrations? Now, because since I've been here, we've had a big giant tree on stage. We've had an inflatable shark. We've had a big boat. Actually, it was a very big boat on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, it took like 3 people to move that thing. But like if somebody's like, do you have like a kind of like a guidelines or anything that you try to stick to? Like, okay, I don't need to be like, I'm going to upset all my friends by asking them to borrow all this stuff so I could put it up on stage if I did it every single week. And you would probably burn yourself out trying to find all these different items.
It is difficult. My rule of thumb is if you can use a visual, then you should.
Okay.
It just doesn't work for every sermon, though. I mean, you probably could if you worked really, really hard. And I'm not. That's not where I excel. I go in spurts of that. You might see like 3 or 4 weeks straight of me having a visual, and then maybe a month of nothing. I go in spurts with it. Like there are probably people that could fit it in every week. I don't know that it's necessary every week, but every time that it really makes sense, you should.
And I think so too. Yeah, the connection, the visual connection that you have with the point that you're trying to get across, is just, it's so compelling. Not unless you have a back history like mine, and I'm preaching about like my testimony.
Right.
Don't use any points of that for your illustration.
Yeah. It really does help, because all what we're trying to do as communicators, and I know that again, the super spiritual crowd goes no, but trust me, I feel like I'm on pretty good grounds with this. Given the fact that the Lord told one of the prophets to tie himself up with a belt, and so that was a visual illustration. He told one of them to walk around naked. Like, the Lord even used visual stuff as well. But we're trying to connect with an audience. And I know that doesn't sound like super spiritual, and that's where people are like, I cannot believe you're saying that. The Spirit is the one. Yes, but the Spirit uses people, and He's equipped us. And so we have to do everything we can to clear the way for the Spirit to move. And so sometimes that means using a visual of some sort, a prop or something that will help people connect with the message in a way that it just helps so much. Like, so probably one of the most popular sermons from this year was "Don't Stop and Settle." And I think I even talked to some people. Had I not had the 3 signs up on stage to illustrate the 3 different places, and if I didn't have the suitcase to show the movement, it would not have stuck the same way. It would have been a good sermon.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been a good sermon. It would not have stuck and hit the same way, I don't think, without being able to visually see. And we understand this about people. The more that we get into, study of how people learn, not everyone is a verbal learner. So not everyone can sit there and listen to what you're saying. Sometimes you have to bring in props and things for the visual learners to help them stay engaged as well. So I do it as often as I can, and I would suggest doing it as often as you can. But make sure that it works. Like, I mean, I've seen some goofy stuff, and I probably have had some goofy ideas. So make sure that it works. Make sure that it's not cheesy and turns people off. But I would use them often, when it comes to visuals and different illustrations like that.
Okay. Last question before we get into our mystery meat. I feel like we've kind of started at a very wide part of the funnel and got it down. So now we're going to be talking about like the individual sermon. Where do you begin your preparation for, not like what time or whatever, like whenever you start to think about the sermon that you're going to be preaching for this specific date that's coming up, where do you begin to it's almost kind of like your foundation for that sermon, and then you start to put up the rafters and the walls and everything else. Like what's the foundation point? Where do you begin with that?
The text is always the foundation.
Okay.
And that's what's funny. Like people that preach like me, and people, we sometimes get criticized for being, maybe not as biblical or not as spiritual or whatnot, because it's the folks that just get up there. They're like, I don't need a story. I got the Word of God, and then they're seen as the Bible folks. Well, I think that's just a misnomer. It's in fact, the reason I preach the way that I do is because I believe so strongly in the Scriptures that I want to properly honor it in the way that I disseminate it to people. That's good. I actually think people that preach in the style that I would adhere to have every bit as much honor for the Bible and the Word of God. We just care so much about it that we want to make sure that the gold that's in it doesn't miss its intended target. So for me, the preparation process on the week of starts at the text. It has to start at the text. And this is where I'm reading the text, and I it's always different though for me. There are some weeks that I feel I can't even explain this. There are some weeks that I just feel the Lord go, just take your notebook and your Bible and go sit down, and I will just give it to you. Like I'll just right there. You don't need another book or nothing. I'm not joking. This will sound super spiritual to some people, and for other people it'll sound like a fairy tale or whatever. And other people, you know, whatever. But like there are times that the Lord just says, "Hey, take your notebook and your Bible, close everything else. I'll just show you what's there." And the Lord writes a sermon in an hour.
Yeah.
And it's not. I can't even take credit for it because I've read all these stories this many times, and then when I read it this time, that He says, "Just sit down and listen to this." It's not something I've ever seen or thought of before.
Yeah.
So that happens. That's probably a rare occasion when He's like, "All right, just close everything else." Outside of that, we're starting with reading the text. We want to read it. And then my goal is to understand the text to the best of my ability, which means I have to go to commentaries and any other helps that I have. So if I'm preaching from a parable and I've got books on parables, I'm going to pull out my books on parables. I'm going to pull up my Logos Bible software, which I would recommend for absolutely anybody that's a Christian whatsoever. You can get a cheap bronze plan of it, which would give you access to thousands of dollars of printed material on your computer for a fraction. Like, I bet $300.
Yeah.
Like, I think when I had the gold plan, I think they told me I had access to like $30,000 worth of print material, and the bronze plan was like $300 through Logos.
Yeah.
I have the gold plan now. Someone from our church, when I began as the lead pastor, wanted to make an investment in me. It's like $1,000 for the gold plan, and I've got more commentaries and books and atlases and maps and fact books and anything, original languages and everything that I would ever want for Bible study. And this is not just for preachers. So I'm getting into Logos Bible software, and my goal is to understand the text. But I'm seeking to understand the text at a level that I'm looking for, and we talked about this last time. I'm looking for the one thing the Lord wants to say to His people.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the one thing. So I don't like, I've heard of people like prepping for like 25 hours on one text. The reason why my prep right now in this current series, I told you I was probably 20 or 30 hours deep all in by this point, is because apologetics is just a different animal.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to cover science, philosophy, history, the Bible, all the objections, all the arguments. So this is a different animal. But like on a given week, I'm not gonna overstudy it. Like, I'm not gonna go like, at some point what I realize is as I'm reading the commentaries, everything is the same. It's like, well, this guy says this guy says this guy says this. Okay, I understand the passage, and then I can ask the Lord, okay, now that I understand the passage, what is it that you're trying to say?
Yeah.
And we can whittle this thing down to one easy to see point, but that point has to come from the text.
Yeah.
It literally, it drives me so crazy when people come up with a point that is not tied to the text, because then the text becomes a prop.
Yeah.
And that's not what it's there for. The text is the message. The power is in the word.
Oh, that's good.
And so if you make a point, like I used to see like people that have 7 points, like the first 2 points are always pray and read the Bible. It's like, good Lord, man.
Sorry, I've been around church enough to where I've seen.
Yeah, every week it's pray and read the Bible. It's like, all right, man, I think that we get that. Why don't you give me 1 point from this text and not? And the thing, it drives me insane to watch this, that people will say, here's what the Lord wants me to tell you. Let me read you a passage, and then they'll make a point, and they say, and go to this passage. It's like, well, wait a second. Why were we in this passage if you got to go over here to explain this to me?
Yeah.
And I know that's part of Bible study to like jump around and all that, but when you're communicating to an audience, especially like for us, a lot of times you got an audience where there's non-Christians, there's people that have never read the Bible, there are people that don't believe that the Bible is true. Then you got your 50-year-old senior saints, 50-year senior saints, whatever. They've been in the church longer than I've been they've been in the church longer than my parents have been in the church.
Yeah.
You got that broad range of people. Like, you got to be like, you got to kind of be really sensitive to that.
Yeah.
It's just, So you can't just get up and make points all over the place. If you said, this is the text the Lord led me to, well, then let the Lord speak from that text. I think, but again, this comes from a lack of formal training, and it comes from some of the formal training not being very effective.
Yeah.
In my opinion, is this whole, well, here's my 3 points and 3 points from 3 different texts and all this, and it's like, and the reason why I preach like that is because the guy before me preached like that, and the guy before him preached like that, and this is the way. If it was good enough for this guy, it's good enough for me. And
you get further and further away from, even if you have somebody initially that has really good formal training, and then somebody passes that training down, there's going to be things that he missed, and then it keeps on going, and then you get further and further away from where you should be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's sometimes you get into situations where I think that you cause more confusion by trying to impress people by showing, oh, look at this, and we're jumping back and forth between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the Lord wants you to do that, but I think that a lot of times we cause more confusion to people that they want to know, like, can I just get some meaning from the one passage that you talked about? Is there something in here for me, or do I really have to do this and this and this and this and this and this to get anything out of it?
Yeah.
Like, that might be what you do in your personal study, but I think that when you're communicating the Word of God to people, simple is always going to be better. And I know this because...
Well, I mean, I also think, too, it kind of goes back to our initial discussion that we had about people taking verses and stuff out of context.
Yes.
Well, if you're preaching a story on Samson and then you immediately go to Philippians 4:13 and say, I could do all things through Christ who strengthens me, you're going to have a bunch of people thinking that they could go lift up cars because God gave them supernatural strength.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't serve any purpose.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, I just watched this with Megan just preaching her first sermon to a crowd. Like, I was a big part of helping her craft that sermon and help her with it. And I feel like one of the things I kept going back to over and over with her was like, listen, just make it simple.
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of times the trap that preachers fall into is we're trying to be clever.
Yeah.
And we're trying to impress people. That way... And what happens with that, and I speak from a place of experience with that because this is where I started out at.
Yeah.
I would make these quotes from books, that way you'd be so impressed that I read this book and that I know who this person is or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, I just resolved just a couple of years ago that my prayer has been, Lord, I don't care if I'm impressive. I just want to be helpful.
Yeah.
And so that has meant me trying to make everything that I do much more simple.
Yeah.
And again, I realize the series I'm doing right now is anything but that. Yeah. But if you listen to any of the other teachings, I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. And that is one of the more regular feedback that I get is like, when you preach the Bible, I actually understand it. When other people preach it, or whenever I'm reading it by myself, I don't really understand it. But whenever you're explaining it, it makes total sense to me. Like I would be able to see that now that you've said that type deal. And I had to lose a lot of the fluff. Like, because I remember, like, and I think sometimes early on in ministry we do that because we want some credibility because we don't have any.
Yeah.
And so we're borrowing credibility from like C.S. Lewis, or we're borrowing credibility from Tolkien or you know, St. Augustine or whatever. And let's just be honest, the people in our pews for the most part, they don't know who those people are, and if they do, they don't care.
Yeah.
At all. And so I've gotten rid of a lot of that. Now, if it serves the service or the sermon, and I feel like the Lord's leading me to use it, I'll use it. But by and large, what I'm trying to do is be helpful and not impressive anymore. Like, I'm past the point of trying to impress people. All I'm concerned with is trying to help them take their next steps on their faith journey.
Yeah. Pointing people to Jesus.
That's it. Yeah.
In a simple way.
Yeah.
And whenever we take people on these long journeys and go around, it's just like if you try to follow somebody, like whenever you're driving on the road and they're not using their blinker and they're not being considerate of the person that they're trying to lead to this specific destination, you're going to get lost, and then you're just going to get frustrated.
This happens every single Sunday in churches.
Yeah.
Everywhere. everyone, like the pastor makes so many twists and turns in the sermon that he can't be followed. And I'll never forget, it was in, I took a course called The Art of Better Preaching with Mark Clark and Carrie Newhoff, and they said no one gets convicted in a fog. I'll never nobody gets convicted in a fog. So if all your twists and turns and this point, that point, this scripture, that scripture, if all it does is confuse everyone in there, the transformation that ultimately every pastor wants to see in their people is actually going to be further away, because you have now muddied the water so much, rather than just coming to them with one thing that they can take home with them that says, this is how your life can be drastically different if you will do this, believe this, pray this, add this discipline. Give them one thing that can actually change their life, because if not, they might walk away and go, that was a good sermon.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I don't know what to do, and by tomorrow they will not even remember what you said. I mean, I just heard Albert Tate. He's an unbelievable pastor in Monrovia. I think it's California. Unbelievable pastor. I was listening to him on the Craft and Character podcast yesterday, which is a preaching podcast, which goes back to never stop growing. So I'm listening to this guy, and he said, here's my goal when I'm communicating. I'm trying to rob you from lunch. Like, I'm trying to make sure that what I said is what you can't not talk about it at lunch. I'm trying to steal the conversation at lunch without even being there.
Yeah.
Like, I want that one thing that you get to be so compelling, and this is why communication is so compelling, that when you go to lunch with your friends after church, you have to talk about the sermon.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just turn it off because everyone's sitting around going, oh, I don't know what he really said.
Yeah.
No, it was so easy for you to understand that you can't help but sit there. And he's like, I want that sermon to be the topic of lunch, because that's when it starts getting in people, is when the conversations. This is why our life groups and things are so important. It's not in just the hearing on Sunday morning. That'll only take you so far. But when you start having conversations with people about it, you start teaching other people about it, you start living it, then it starts getting inside of you, and then you actually get transformed by the preaching of the word. The transformation doesn't necessarily happen in the minute that you hear the word. It's in the minute that you practice the word, live it out, recite it, whatever it is. That's when the transformation comes. So like the application to what I tell you on Sunday, if you don't live it out on Monday, then all you did was sit through a nice experience on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. And so like that's once you go live it out is when it becomes actually transformational.
Yeah. How many people, whenever you preach that sermon series, whenever you're like, don't come to me with your problems, go to the person you have a problem with. How many people came up to you and said, you know what, I really put into practice what you preached?
Tons.
And they were coming up to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even preach it. They were like, man, Scott's message, like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I had one of those conversations directed at me, but I also myself had to have that conversation with somebody else as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I had,
but it was a huge growth moment for a lot of people, because we tend to think that like I've got to take everything to Pastor Scott's office.
Yeah, it was,
and that's not the biblical way of doing it. And you were just like, look, let me just open your eyes to the biblical way of doing it.
Huge growth moment for our church.
Yeah.
Someone was telling me last week. They said still, because the result of that sermon in life group, when they hear someone getting ready to talk about someone else, the whole group says, shut it down.
Yep.
Shut it down right now. We're not doing this.
Yep.
A whole group. I'm going to guess, that's got to be unbelievably transformational.
Yep.
Because, and I'm not saying this is true of this group, because I don't go to this group. I don't, at all. But I'm going to guess that a lot of church small groups at any church are kind of like little gossip huddles.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right? And when you hear about one of them that goes, you know what, anytime it starts to come up, we say shut it down.
Yeah, we do that in our group.
That's
too.
Transformational.
Yeah.
That's transformational, because I imagine before that sermon, that's not what would happen, right? I feel like that's what they're telling me in that moment. That's not what would happen. And so that was transformational, because they were in community together to live it out.
Yeah.
And now it's gone beyond sitting through a nice sermon, because if I'm impressive on Sunday morning and you don't go do anything with it, then I could prep for 3 hours or 30 hours. If you don't do nothing with it, I've wasted my time in regards to that. I want you to actually go and be more like Jesus, because I think that that's going to make your life better.
Oh, for sure.
And so if you don't do anything with it, then honestly, you might as well be on the lake on Sunday morning or wherever you want to be. If you only come and you don't have any intention of ever living this stuff out, I would go do something else on Sunday mornings. Like if I wasn't going to live it, if I wasn't going to live it out, like you don't get special points just for showing up.
No,
at all. Like you just showing up.
It just goes into the importance of whenever we ask people to do things like take those next steps, like join a small group. It's because it's going to help reinforce everything that
100%.
we've talked about. It's good stuff.
100%.
I'm fired up, man.
Yeah.
I'm fired up for this mystery meat question too.
I was hoping we would skip it since we went long.
Oh gosh, no. It don't matter. We've gone longer than this. All right. Oh, this may be another Anna question.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's probably.
This has me nervous already.
I see handwriting, and it's not mine because I handwrote mine. Oh, this one's easy. Would you rather live on the moon or live on Mars?
I wouldn't like to live either of those places.
That's not the question, Scott.
I guess the moon, because it's going to be...
Last week I had to pick if I wanted banana fingers or banana toes.
and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to hope that my logic is sound, but again, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm going to say the moon simply because the flight would be shorter.
Yes.
That would be true, right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we can't... Yeah.
The flight to Mars would be way further.
Yeah, I think it's a 2-year flight to get to Mars.
I don't like flying in airplanes.
Yeah.
Which is why I just have already decided there's most places in this world I'm never going to see.
Yeah.
Because I do not like long flights. I'm going to imagine it's even worse in space and in a shuttle than an airplane that has TV and Wi-Fi and snacks
you can
and
stand
drinks
up and walk around instead of
so
floating
I'm going to
around.
go with whatever the shorter distance is, but I'm going to pray for a very short existence wherever it is that I'm forced to live in outer space, because none of that sounds appealing to me at all.
Yeah, here's your house on the moon. You're like, it's up for sale. Like, no, you have to go there. You're like, I don't want to.
Just give it back to whatever alien you stole it from. Just give it back.
All right, the twist on this question. Would you rather live on the moon but have the amenities that you can have here on Earth, or live back on Earth but you have to live in a tent camping?
I don't want to camp ever.
Well, I'm just saying, it's moon and you have a house and you have an AC.
If I could just stay on the moon and not ever have to travel again, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, but there's no restaurants or anything like that.
You said all the amenities.
I'm talking about living situation. It says, would you rather live on the moon or live on Mars?
I would take camping with all the other things I could do.
Live in a tent.
Yeah.
And McDonald's for breakfast.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm not one of these people that has a desire to go to space. I'm not interested in any of that at all.
No, because you know what? I've got people that have already done that, and I don't know them, but I know that people have already done it, and they've gone and they've taken pictures.
Yeah.
Our Earth is round. Sorry, guys. I don't mean to go too controversial, but our Earth is round, and
I just don't care about it at all.
And the universe is ever expanding. That's good enough for me. That's great information for me to know.
I don't care about space at all. All this talk of you can pay $250,000 to fly in Elon's rocket or whatever. I do not care.
Yeah, I don't want to do
at
that
all. I don't even think I would take advantage of that if it was $250.
Yeah,
I don't have any interest in leaving this Earth.
Yeah,
to go to space. No, there's so much more stuff on this Earth I would rather do than go to space. I just don't even. But that's not. Maybe someone else's interest. It's just not my interest at all.
Yeah. The only thing I want from space is a lightsaber.
A lightsaber, and I do like some of that astronaut ice cream, even though I'm not. I'm not sure that's is that
Living in
legit?
living in Texas, they would have it. It's like the freeze dried ice.
Is that
ice
stuff
cream.
legit though?
No,
is that really what they have in space?
It's so freeze dried ice cream. It's like it's not cold and it's like really chalky.
Yeah, no, I've had that.
You've had
so
it.
I'm saying I like that. Is that really what astronauts have?
I don't know. I mean, dude,
They sell
they'll
it as
marketing
astronaut ice cream. So.
Dude, they'll market anything to get people to spend money.
I'm in on that, but I just have I'm not interested in the space thing at all. I don't know. Maybe that puts me in the minority. I know that so many people are so excited about all these technological advances and whatnot, and I'm just like, just leave me alone.
For real. Hey, man, I really enjoyed this one. I don't know. We're probably going to have to do another part 3.
I got so much more.
I know, but
we
it's
should
such
just
a good...
create a preaching podcast.
A preaching
we can do
podcast.
this every week. Just where me and you talk about preaching.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. Maybe we'll just do like a potluck to like the sequel. I don't know. But I enjoyed it. It's been a good because I'm learning.
Yeah.
Because like one of the things whenever you hired me on, you're like, what's something that you would like to learn? And I just said I'd like to become a better communicator. Because I feel like I'm so scatterbrained and I have good thoughts, but I need to make them all cohesive.
Yep.
And so there's been some things that you've worked with me with, and I actually picked your brain a little bit before this because I've got a small speaking engagement coming up towards the end of the month, and I'm like, this is kind of like where I want to go. I just need to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
And so I've learned a lot. So I've appreciated the conversation, and I hope that whoever listens to this has learned a lot too. And the bottom line from this podcast, this episode, is always be pointing people back to Jesus. Yeah. Goodness gracious. Yep. So good.
Share
so
this.
Good.
Share this stuff with other people.
Yes. Share them. Share it. Thank you so much for being an avid listener to all of you, the potluck faithful.
Got tens of you out there. We appreciate you so much. See y'all next time.
Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and you can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.